Okay, so I had to come on here and do a a bit of a rant training. Rant training? Is that such a thing? It might be in my world because it's usually something that I experience that triggers me to create something that helps people not do that. And I will walk you through what happened really quick so you know. But this is about how to properly apply or request being a guest on someone's podcast. So, as you may or may not know, I have a podcast called Simplify and Multiply, and it's directed to my solopreneur audience, and it's a mix of inspirational, tactical, practical advice around all different aspects of running a successful business, from dealing with fear to getting a book published to hiring people, you name it. I have it in there. So that being said, occasionally from time to time I get an email or a message on LinkedIn where somebody wants to be a guest on my show. I've never gotten a email or LinkedIn message from anyone who themselves wanted to be the guest. And this is really interesting because there's so many businesses and services out there that are offering to get you on podcasts as a guest in the hopes that you'll get all this great exposure and blah, 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 blah. So this email I got today was a rando email out of the blue, and it was from a young man who apparently he was trying to get his dad on my show. Now, the email opened up, "Dear Terry, I'd like to introduce you to," and then his dad's name. And then the rest of the email, and it was quite long, was all about how awesome his dad was. You know, like all of his promotional, appearances, the books that he wrote, the other podcasts he's been a guest on, where he spoke on stage, because apparently he's a speaker and a trainer and has written books. Excuse me. Well, how about that? Yes, I did just have lunch. And it just kind of went on, and there was nothing in there about simplify and multiply. And I was like, okay. So I looked up this guy's profile on LinkedIn, looked up his dad's profile on LinkedIn. I looked at the website of his dad's, and I was like, okay, so I did a little reconnaissance because, you never know when it could be a fit. I'm always thinking about my audience and ways to provide value. And so I I decided to call the young man who had sent me the email and have a little conversation with him. And so I called him and I got voicemail. So I did not leave a message because it was already becoming a big time suck as it was. And I thought, I just got to shoot a video on this. So here are a couple things that you can keep in mind if you want to be on a podcast as a guest. Okay, so guesting on podcasts can give you greater awareness and greater exposure to audiences that you may never be able to reach on your own or through other means. So that is a good thing. There are tons of services out there, tons of companies that will claim to get you on podcasts. I haven't come across any that are doing anything remotely high touch, but that doesn't mean that they're not out there. And what I mean by high touch is actually doing real research into real podcasts that have good demographics that they can, make sure it's a match to your strategy. So what I want to leave you with is my takeaway as a podcast producer and host is that if you want to be on my show, you have to do a couple of things. One, approach me personally, meaning you have to say, "Hey, Terry, my name is so-and-so, and I've been listening to your show," right? That's the first checkbox. Have you been listening to my show? Do you know the style of my show, the style of my approach in interviewing guests, what I talk about, what the show's about, all of those things? Because I don't have a formal media kit about my show because I don't need one, quite frankly. I seek out all of my guests. I personally talk to them. I interview them. I make sure that what they're going to say or what they're about or what they have is going to be of tremendous value to my audience, and that I know we're going to have a great conversation and have a good time. So Those are the things that are really important to me. The other thing is, by doing that personal approach and knowing that whoever is, reaching out to be a guest on my show is going to be someone who's actually thought about how the strategies mesh. So if you're trying to be a guest on a podcast, you want to make sure that your brand aligns with or complements that show's brand. And a lot of guests don't think about this, right? So there's all kinds of things that can be a problem around that. So if you get on a show that the brand is not really great, that says possibly that their audience might not be a fit for you or your books or your services, your programs, etc. So keep that in mind. So you have to have some good brand complement or alignment. So that way that the conversation that you guys have, or if you come on with an offer, that audience is going to be like, hey, this is cool. The goal is that you want people to listen, right? You want them to listen and you want them to take action. So if there's no value that you're bringing as a guest, then there's no reason for you to be on that show, because you're not going to inspire anyone to take action or to remember you, for that matter, if you're not bringing in some real value and having some good provocative conversation. As an aside, if you're going to be a guest, and I've had people who have admins that send these, like, these are the questions that you can ask Paul or Joe or Mary or whatever on the show. And I'm like, okay, thank you for sharing. I'm not going to ask any of those questions, And if you listen to my show, you would know that. So understand that there are shows that have that very formulaic, boilerplate kind of approach. Like, so why don't you introduce yourself? And, anyway, don't get me going about all that. You have to remember that a podcast host and a podcast producer, if they're one and the same, they're very protective of their audience and their show. And they want to produce something of value, and they're very particular about the content that goes on there. At least I know I am, right? I'm speaking for myself. So anyway, getting back to being a guest, you want to make sure that you've done the right kind of research to understand the audience of the podcast that you want to go after. Approach them personally, okay, as I mentioned before, and make sure that what you're bringing has value. So that's why I really enjoy having a conversation with my guest before we actually go on the air. And often it happens weeks before we actually schedule the session. So what this does for me is it helps me understand some nuances about that person. It's almost like we do kind of a pre-interview interview. So I can really kind of dig, because I love to dig on these sessions that I have with my guests. And I want them coming away from the experience thinking that was some of the most thought-provoking questions I've ever been asked. That was the greatest show I was ever on, because they got to go deep and they got to pause and think about things instead of just running off these liners. And those make for the best shows. And very often I don't even know what I'm going to be asking half the time, because I don't follow a formula per se. So just keep those things in mind. Make sure you're bringing value, that you've done your research, that you're strategically aligned to the brand and the audience before you go out and try to pitch people. And when you go to pitch them, just really be personal and be honest, do the research, listen to their show, because that's flattering for a host to hear comments and feedback about their show, because it's a very one-way medium, podcasting. The only feedback we really get is when people, post reviews, and that's kind of one-dimensional. Reviews are great, don't get me wrong. I love reviews, and they really help. They help new listeners choose whether or not that podcast is for them. So they do have a role. So anyway, don't let me just go on and on about this, because it's a big topic and I have lots of good stuff about podcasting that I talk about. So best thing to do it is, when you want to be a guest, just be yourself, right? Go out there and find the people that you want to be on their show, and who knows, they might have you back on a regular basis. And then next thing you know, you're expanding your audience and you're adding value and you've got all these new connections, and it's a wonderful thing. So good luck with guesting on podcasts.